The radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Tuesday, May 14th. Thanks for joining me. We're talking, we'll talk news, and then we'll talk news, and then towards the second half of the show, we'll take on Konstantin Kisin's video essay on the Atheist Delusion, or his view of atheism and religion, which I think is interesting and quite common these days. So worthwhile addressing and you know, very well articulated. All right, a lot to talk about in the news. So we will jump into that. I think the most important story, you know, today, really the most important story maybe in a long time, is the release yesterday of ChatGPT 4.0. 4.0, is that right? I mean, I don't know if you've seen videos of this. If you haven't, you should. It's pretty stunning. I mean, ChatGPT has already been amazing and useful and pretty impressive on a lot of fronts. Yes, it does go crazy a little bit, and it does lie sometimes. It'll tell you untruth. It can't lie because it can't think. But it you know, but this is an amazing step forward. Not only primarily because of its usability and interactivity. So ChatGPT, OpenAI released yesterday ChatGPT 4, and 4.0, not 0, 4.0, I think. Small o, not even a capital O. Anyway, what's truly stunning about it is you ask the question, you ask, what is it, ChatGPT a question, you interact with ChatGPT, as if it's a human being on the other side. The latency is non-existent, so it's like you're having a conversation over the phone. ChatGPT can also engage in material that you provided via video. So I saw there's a video sample of this where ChatGPT is going through a geometry problem with a kid. So it's acting as a tutor. And it's got the geometry problem on one screen, and it's interacting on another screen, and it is referring the kid to the particular geometry thing. I think it's on one iPad, but anyway, and it'll, you know, it'll notice when the kid touches the screen in a particular way, and it'll comment on it and suggest, you know, maybe that's not right. And it interacts like a tutor would interact. It's a feminine voice that's very friendly and appealing. It really is amazing. Now, you know, another video I saw is we've had these translating apps that have been pretty good that you can go in any language and you can use for translation. But this is a next level. Right, so you tell the ChatGPT, same app, you don't have to switch the translating app, same ChatGPT app. You say to the ChatGPT, you know, I'm trying to have a conversation with somebody here who only speaks Italian. Can you translate their Italian to English and my English to Italian? ChatGPT says, sure, I can do that. And then they have a conversation, and ChatGPT translates everything that's being said. It is pretty amazing. It really is pretty amazing, and I can see that this is how so much of our lives in a few years are going to be. It's gonna enhance and simplify and make our life so much easier. We're gonna go to ChatGPT and say, hey, I need a flight to to Los Angeles, chat, what date, when do you need it? Do you need any hotels? Here are the brands you like. Is this good? You want a late checkout? And it's done, right? Or you just tell it, do it based on my preferences. So it checks off the late checkout. It has your preference for hotel in LA. It does it all. So it is pretty amazing stuff. Pretty amazing stuff. I haven't seen. I mean, this is a massive technological leap. I think it's a big step forward from having to type in a question and getting an answer and typing in a question, because of its, the ability to interact and the ability to get commentary from the ChatGPT and respond to it. The fact that it's such a friendly voice, it sounds like it's a human being on the other side. It comes across so naturally that it really does sound like a human actor on the other side. And if I didn't know any better, I think some of the videos online are kind of rigged with actors and some text on the other thing. But no, this is real. It's, at the rate AI is moving forward, at the rate it's improving, it didn't exist. What is it, a year ago? Year and a half ago? There were no chatbots. And at the rate it's developing, and given the competitive nature, and they're going to be competing products and with different voices, and I said this in the past. I said this when we first saw ChatGPT come out, that this is going to revolutionize the way we live within 10 years. And now I think it's going to happen faster than that. And it's a massive revolution. It's going to change the way people learn. It's going to, you can, the possibilities in terms of tutoring are just unbelievable. There's already a lot of online AI type tutoring, but this takes it again to the next level. And companies are going to be built around this to deliver all kinds of goods and services. And what excites me, just given what I need it for, is just a personal assistant in your hand, and any request, anything you need. What Siri and Alexa promised they would be. Hey, Alexa, I don't say the other one because she'll wake up on my phone and bug me. Do this and this for me, and let me know what's happening here, and in a completely natural conversational way. I can see how the sci-fi movies of lonely men falling in love with their AI bots. This is going to become real because she has this appealing voice. She'll be really, really nice to you, and it's dangerous for lonely men, and I guess lonely women too. The appeal of this kind of stuff is because it's so realistic and it's so well done, and it does come across as if it's independent consciousness, that it's not just some computer speaking to you. It comes across as something real. Anyway, play around with it, guys. Let me know what you think. ChatGPT 4.0. I'm going to be playing around with it. I'll let you know what I discover, what I find, and we can compare notes on a future show. But definitely engage in this. This is the future. If you don't engage with it, you're going to be left behind. If you whatever job you have, take the ChatGPT 4.0. Take whatever AI you have access to. But this one is particularly amazing. And think, could something like this do my job? Most likely, the answer is it could do an aspect of your job. It could do a part of your job. And then I think you need to start thinking about what can it do better than me? And then where can I add value? Where is the maximum where I can add value? Because the sooner you can figure that out, the sooner you can figure out what you're adding value on top of whatever business is going to deploy AI towards, the more successful you will be, because a lot of people will just wait until this hits them straight in the face. They're not going to prepare for it. And this is, this is something you can't prep for. You can't prep for. So, Apollosus is already claiming that I am not Yaron, that this is just a fake GPT. I don't think they're quite there yet, but soon. They've got the voice down, and video is good. It's not perfect yet. We might get there at some point, but there are companies now that are building platforms for podcasts which are going to be delivered completely from start to end by AI. And I wonder if you will even notice. It's spooky stuff, but I find this, I don't like horror movies. I don't usually like spooky. This is fascinating and exciting. And I want to kind of, there's a sense in which I want to fast forward and see where this is leading us to. There's another sense in which I don't, because I'll be whatever years older, and that's no good. Go check it out. Let me know what you think. We'll keep doing that. Yeah, I know Sora can do the video. It's not quite there yet, but once you combine Sora with GPT-4o, and then imagine the next generation a year from now, it really is pretty amazing, and hard to predict where this is heading. It is going to be interesting. It is going to be interesting to what extent we can train the ChatGPT on Yaron, on me, and have him do a show and see if you guys can tell the difference. We might do that at some point. We might do that just for fun at some point. All right. I still think, that has to be the most significant story of the last few months, and it's going to change our lives in dramatic, profound, deep ways that I don't think we've completely really come to grips with, or have a real clear idea of how that is going to happen. All right. Here's a story about something that's dying, the exact opposite of ChatGPT, of AI. So it turns out that over the last, maybe it's been 20 years, but it's only accelerated. Top scientific journals, or scientific journals, not necessarily top scientific journals, but scientific journals have been flooded with fake papers, fake studies, which have led to thousands of studies, papers in scientific journals. We're not talking about the humanities here. We're talking about sciences that are being retracted. Wiley, which is a 217-year-old publisher based in New Jersey, today, announced that it's closing 19 journals. It's closing 19 journals. Because they've been affected by large-scale research fraud. In the past 2 years, Wiley has retracted more than 11,300 papers that appeared compromised. And they've already closed 4 journals, so the 19 journals on top of the 4 journals they've already closed. At least 2 other publishers have retracted hundreds of suspected papers each. This, by the way, comes from a story in the Wall Street Journal today. Several others have pulled smaller clusters, but we're talking about thousands and thousands of papers. This is real fraud. This is not people, doing, making mistakes in their publication or using the wrong stat or whatever. This is people committing fraud. Now, remember, this is a business. Academic publishing is a business, $30 billion business, not a small business. And reading about this, it seems like there are these paper mills. There are people who will write a paper for you, add you as one of the co-authors to it, submit the paper to a bunch of journals, get it published, and you can add it to your resume. This is kind of a consequence of the publish or perish mentality at universities. Also, a phenomena of, I think, the expansion of publishing in academic journals and science research to the entire world, including places which are not known for their high levels of integrity, and where paper mills like this are not considered completely nutty, as I think they would be in the United States. But this is infecting everybody. And, and this is not just somebody not doing good science. This is somebody not doing science. This is people making stuff up, which is, it's truly scary. And it also means that the journals who have supposedly a rigorous peer review methodology to make sure that the papers they publish are good papers, is dramatically flawed. Dramatically flawed. And that maybe they need a new methodology, maybe they need a lot more rigor, or maybe the model needs to move in academia away from perish or publish, but it's hard to believe that that is going to happen. Academia is super conservative and unlikely to change, and tenure makes it incredibly lucrative not to change. Getting tenure, you want to keep it, and attaining tenure is what provides you with an incentive to cheat in order to get more journal publications so you can get more tenure. 2-3 more papers, and even I would have gotten tenure. I didn't know about this when I was a professor. Maybe it's the days before, right? Maybe it's the days before this actually happened. This actually became such an industry, such an industrial attitude. Interesting article in the Wall Street Journal titled "Flood of Fake Science Forces Multiple Journal Closures, Widely to Shutter 19 or more journals, some tainted by fraud." I think, at least in the publishing side of this, this is going to become a big deal. You now have problematic paper screeners, companies that are going to screen papers for these kind of problems. You're going to have. I wonder if we could use AI to screen the papers. I'm sure we could. We'd do a better job than humans, and would be really, really, really fast, right? Tools are coming to clean this up. My guess is scientific fraud has always existed. It's probably more prevalent today because of the pressures of tenure, and it's probably more common today because because of the internationalization and the expansion of this paper mill mentality, or this writing paper mentality to the third world. There's just more people, greater incentive, and cultures that have less reputation for honesty and less of a kind of a tradition around what academia looks like, and I think they're taking advantage of it. If you look at just the sheer number of papers, for example, coming out of China or coming out of India, just the sheer number of them has to cause some suspicion. And I'm not just picking on those countries. I'm sure it's in a lot of different places, prevalent in a lot of different places. All right, so academic papers are problematic. Does that mean you shouldn't trust the science journals? I still think that there is some validity to the screening that the university where professor has. If you're reading a journal article that's written by a bunch of people whose universities you've never heard of, you've got to be more skeptical than if the journal article comes from Harvard or MIT or Caltech or something like that. Doesn't mean it's true. It just means it has more credibility. It has more credibility than otherwise. So you just need to find various markers to figure out what appears to be legitimate papers and which are not. And then, of course, you have to read the paper. If you really want to know, you have to read the paper and figure out whether they're doing the math and the stats and whether they've designed the experiments right and whether it makes any sense. If you're really trying to understand that, and with all due respect to all the so-called science skeptics, they don't do that. They just take a tribal approach, and you see that all over Twitter. They take a tribal approach to the science, and but they almost never do actual rigorous scientific analysis of the science or of the claimed science. So it's just who wrote it, which tribe do they belong to, is the indication, and to do it properly, to really figure out what's true or not, to really figure out which one of these papers is right or not, is hard work, and work that requires actual knowledge, which most of the so-called science skeptics just don't have. They don't have the knowledge. They just don't know. They wouldn't know good science if it hit them in the forehead. So, this is by no means to say go out there and be skeptical of anything you read in a scientific journal. Quite the contrary. This is to say that, if you're going to embrace a skeptical view or a non-skeptical view, you better have some solid basis for it. Otherwise, you're just ignorant. And most of us are, of most of these scientific questions. All right. Let's see. All right. Remind everybody, you can ask questions, super chat. You can cover anything you want. Any questions you have, I am happy to answer. I'm answering. I answer pretty much everything being asked, as even if it's disagreeing, obnoxious, or whatever. So use the super chat to ask questions. A few other things, just quickly, in terms of public announcements. I'll be repeating this during the show. A few things. One, I am running a public speaking seminar, public speaking workshop, really, small group. You can sign up for it on my website. If you go to yaronbrookshow.com and click on the workshop tab, you'll get information of it for it. I think it's June. I think it's 19th, the day after OCON ends. It'll have 10 people, so you get a lot of hands-on personal attention. I think the people who attended in Amsterdam were really happy with it. I've done it in London. This time it's in the U.S. In California. If you're coming to OCON, it's one extra day. You can stay over and do it. If you're not coming to OCON, maybe you live in California, you can come by. It's $1,000 for the whole day. Public speaking seminar with one-on-one interaction, one-on-one. You will actually present, and I will critique it. If you want ad-free podcast, if you want to sign up for ad-free podcast, then you can by downloading the Spreaker app and signing on to a members club. You can do that also from my website at yaronbrookshow.com, and there's a members club there tab that you can sign on, and then you can get the podcast. I think it's $10 a month, and you can get the podcast free of all advertising. I know a lot of you complain about the ridiculous ads that they run during my show. And then yeah, let's, so just a reminder on those two things. All right. The other big story that I think we will pay for years to come, already paying for in a sense, but are going to pay for a lot more in the future, is the tariffs that Biden is about to sign. This, of course, is a pivot of U.S. policy which started with Trump and has been embraced, and if you will, now there's a competition between Trump and Biden and who can increase tariffs more. Trump has promised 10% tariffs across the board and 100% tariffs on everything coming from China. So Biden is getting on top of this, and he's, I talked about this yesterday, 100% tariffs on electric vehicles, and massive increases on tariffs on batteries and a bunch of other things that are coming. And this is gonna be, I think, if Trump gets elected, which it looks like he's going to, then this is going to be, he's going to double up on this. He's going to increase it. And indeed, there's a story today about the fact that the Chinese are not only, everybody's afraid that they're going to be dumping electric vehicles and batteries and minerals on the United States, and that would be terrible for us if we got cheap electric cars and cheap batteries and cheap minerals. It would be really, really bad for us. Now it turns out that the Chinese are selling a lot of cooking oil in the United States. And so the U.S. soybean trade group, which is another way to say the U.S. Soybean lobby pressure group, which represents the U.S. soybean processor. I'm not kidding here. This is serious stuff. This includes Cargill, Bunge Global, I don't know who that's at, and Archer Daniel Midland's, of course. Archer Daniel Midland's and Cargill, the biggest agricultural companies in the world. They want to, now we already have 15.5% tariffs on Chinese cooking oil. They want to significantly increase it because guess what? They can't compete. Now, they're also claiming that American cooking oil is much healthier and much better for you than Chinese cooking oil. There's a claim, I believe. And therefore, we should put tariffs on Chinese, raise the cost of frying stuff, which will probably, if we actually raise the cost of frying stuff, that's probably good for the health of Americans. But anyway, so expect French fries and anything fried to now be significantly more expensive, thanks to the soybean trade group, the soybean lobby pressure group. And this, of course, brings us to a point Ayn Rand made about the mixed economy. The mixed economy very quickly deteriorates into basically gang warfare. It deteriorates into pressure group gang warfare. And that's what you're seeing. You've got the auto lobby that is lobbying for subsidies for the EVs and blocking competition. You've got the companies that are getting huge subsidies now from the government to build batteries in the United States. And they want to be able to build batteries free of competition, because if there's competition, they might not win, and yet they're getting subsidies, and the U.S. government doesn't want to waste the subsidies. So they have a lobby to try to get tariffs and try to get protection. And you've got the soybean lobby. Do you know how much farm interests have lobbied the Congress? How much money they've spent on lobbying Congress in anticipation, I think, of a new farm bill, which either has passed recently or about to pass. How much money have they spent to lobby Congress on farming, which is basically Congress, the farm bill is just a bunch of protectionist and subsidies, and it's bipartisan. Yeah. I mean, it was something like $500 million just recently, $500 million to lobbying efforts in order to manipulate things so that they get to benefit from the farm bill. And guess who pays for that? We do. Higher prices. And significantly higher prices of everything that's in the Farm Bill. What else do we pay for? We pay for lousy products. We get corn syrup instead of sugar. We get ethanol instead of just running on gasoline. We get all kinds of agricultural products we don't need. We get expensive milk. We get, the list is endless. And one of the things that is truly stunning about all of this is that, nobody really cares, right? There's no opposition to any of this, right? It's Democrats and Republicans. The only thing that differentiates them is what pressure group gang, what gang of mobsters they happen to support, what gang of mobsters they want to subsidize, what gang of mobsters they want to protect. But there's no difference between them in terms of, indeed, there's nobody on the political map, and it's actually talking about this. I realize that most of you are not interested because there's just no interest out there in freedom. Nobody cares about liberty. Nobody cares about freedom. Nobody cares about what happens to the money you get taxed. Nobody cares about all the money the government is borrowing, which brings us to another topic we'll talk about in a second. Nobody cares about any of the economic liberty issues. They're just irrelevant. There's no passion behind it. There's no excitement behind it. And when there's no passion behind people trying to fight for capitalism, trying to fight for actual freedom, then the government railroads us, and it just becomes worse and worse and worse. And while we're distracted by the culture wars, we're distracted by woke this, woke that, religion this, religion that, Congress, in a bipartisan fashion, is steamrolling us, literally steamrolling us, taking our money, deploying it to the most absurd, ridiculous causes, making us potentially dramatically poorer, setting this country up for massive failure in the future as all these economic schemes and economic fraud that they're committing against us all ultimately plays itself out. And you can see that in the discussion about the debt. Nobody in this country cares about the debt. It's not an issue. When was the last time you heard a politician say anything about the debt, about the size of the debt, about the cost of the debt, about what's going on? Nobody, literally nobody cares. I mean, I bring it up every few weeks because it's so infuriating that it doesn't make the media, and the politicians don't give a damn. And you don't give a damn until the big financial crisis, until your taxes go up, until inflation happens, and then you'll, I don't know, blame woke, whatever. But it's happening now. And it happened under Bush, and it happened under Obama, and it happened under Trump, and it happened under Biden, and nobody cares. It's a bipartisan conspiracy theory, if you want one, where everybody is silent about the fact that government is spending your money, my money, by doing so, repressing economic growth, repressing our ability to actually be as rich as we should be, and destroying our own and our children's future. And again, nobody cares. Nobody cares. So debt, in the first 7 months of fiscal year 2024, spending on net interest has reached $514 billion with a B, surpassing spending on both national defense and Medicare. So we spent less on Medicare and less on national defense than we did on interest payments, net interest. So on the national debt. Overall, this year, in the first 7 months of the fiscal year, the government, the U.S. government, your government has spent $3.9 trillion of your money. Your money. And, Trump increased our taxes dramatically when he was president. And now Biden is going to dramatically increase our taxes with tariffs. And again, nobody cares. Nobody cares. And as they increase our taxes, that's not going to reduce the deficit because they're going to spend it all. Interest on the debt is currently the fastest growing part of the budget. It's nearly doubled since 2023, from 2020 to 2023, nearly doubled, just the interest. Net interest is on track to reach $870 billion by the end of this fiscal year. And of course, that is nothing as compared to how bad it's going to get. So, and nobody cares. Nobody actually cares. And what we're going to see, again, in terms of raising your taxes, because your taxes are being raised every time tariffs go up, a tax is being raised, and a tax is raised on consumption. It's a regressive tax. The poorer you are, the bigger portion of your income is paid now to the government, and it is disgusting and despicable that there is no voice in American politics today. I can't think of another era in American politics where there was no voice in American politics that actually stood for economic liberty, economic freedom. No voice in American politics today standing against dramatic raises in taxes on the American people. And that the so-called freedom movement, liberty movement, whatever you want to call it, not a peep. I mean, there are a few writers like Scott Lincecum and a few other people who care, but almost nobody else gives a damn. I mean, you look at Twitter, you look at other things, you look at places where people are writing about stuff, and this is just doesn't make the cut, right? Doesn't make the cut. It's a sad state of the world. We live in these great times, greatest time to ever be alive in human history, and we're going to give it all up because both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party gain your support, and because of the soybean lobby and the EV lobby and the battery lobby, and most Americans are too busy on trivialities to see how their actual freedom is being curtailed, destroyed, limited, and it's a unique period in history. All right, what was I trying to do? Not this page. All right, let's close that. All right, what else did I want to talk about? I mean, I like this proposal by Scott Lincecum. I mean, basically, people are constantly, that is the wrong one. Anyway, that's the wrong link for some reason. Anyway, you care about cost of living of Americans? You care about the fact that it's very expensive to live, that everything is expensive, food is expensive, all this stuff is expensive? Well, one easy way to do this is to eliminate tariffs. Eliminate them, zero them out. And the cost of living of Americans would drop dramatically. And by the way, I know this is counterintuitive and hard for you, but just try. It will actually increase jobs in the United States, increase productive jobs in the United States, and actually increase our welfare overall. All you have to do is lower tariffs to zero, and suddenly, you get a massive increase in the quality of life, standard of living, and a decline in the cost of living for Americans. But again, it's like talking to the wall. Nobody cares. All right, one other story relating to the Chinese, because I know how much you guys love talking about China. And that is, it turns out that there's a lot of Chinese escaping China, basically. China's very oppressive. The economy right now is not doing well. And the Chinese authorities are becoming more and more regulatory bound. They're copying America in terms of regulations, and much worse, of course, because they don't have a rule of law. So a lot of Chinese, a lot of middle-class Chinese, a lot of working-class Chinese are packing up, and they're trying to come to the United States. Now, we've made it very clear that we don't want them to come legally because we don't facilitate legal migration. It's almost impossible to do. So they're taking planes to places like Ecuador. They're crossing the jungle in Panama. They are trekking up through Central America, through Mexico, and they're coming in illegally. And, instead of viewing them as, wow, how courageous is that? How amazing is that for them to be pursuing a better life and be willing to really the hardships, be willing to take on the hardships that are involved in trying to get into the United States illegally. America welcomes them by arresting them. And here's the thing. If you come to the United States illegally and you can't, and your asylum claim is not valid, and I don't think, unless you're a political refugee from China, I don't think the United States recognizes asylum seekers from China, then what happens is that you get arrested and then you get sent back to the country from which you came. The U.S. border officials have arrested 37,000 Chinese nationals on the southern border in 2023, which is 10 times the number from a year earlier, and corresponds to Xi becoming, even more and more authoritarian over the last few years, and as a consequence, the Chinese economy, Chinese freedom, all in decline. So for a while there, China was not cooperating with the U.S. and basically saying, we're not going to cooperate. We don't care. You get to keep these Chinese that have snuck into your country. We don't want them back. So we're not going to cooperate with you about extraditing them back. Well, now you can all be relieved. I'm sure you're some people out there very, very happy by the fact that the United States government is now going to work with the Chinese authoritarian government, the thuggish government of China, and they are going to facilitate the return of Chinese nationals who have made it after that amazing trek, have made it to the United States, the land of the free and the home of the brave. We're going to put them on airplanes and send them back to be oppressed by their masters in China. We're going to send them back, right, to the authoritarian state, because we don't value freedom anymore. We don't value individuals anymore. We don't value individuals seeking freedom. We have reverted to a primitive, barbaric, zero-sum view of the world. If they come here, then they're taking jobs, they're taking money, they're taking cost. When every economic study shows exactly the opposite. Check out Bryan Caplan's book on immigration, which is excellent and in simple language that everybody can understand. And if you want economic studies, yeah, we can actually read some economic studies together, and I'll show you that unequivocally immigrants, including low-income immigrants, raise Americans' wages, raise the opportunities for Americans, raise the standard of living of Americans. And particularly Chinese would be my guess. They tend to be entrepreneurial, hardworking. Many of them are middle class with educations. They definitely are added benefit. But no, we're going to send them back. We're going to send them back, and the Chinese government, I'm sure, is going to allow them to continue their lives as normal. They're not going to send to any gulag. They're not going to have their social score demerits. They're not going to be penalized for wanting to get out of China. I'm sure they won't be penalized because China has become such a wonderful, embracing, friendly place, particularly for people who try to leave China. Really disgusting, despicable, that we would send somebody back to authoritarian regime. But that is what it means to build walls. That's what it means to hate on immigrants. And that's what it means to, to hate illegal immigration, whatever the hell that is, and to want them out of here. It means sending them back to the horrible places from which they come and us not caring one iota about it. They're human beings, but so what? So what? All right. So yes, China's helping us send them back their people that they want back. All right, let's see, a few more stories. Let's see, we did that. I'm just cleaning this up. Okay, a few fun stories. Yeah, these are all fun stories. We'll see how many of these we get through. Otherwise, some of them I'll just leave for tomorrow. Don't forget, you can ask questions. We've kind of got a target of about $250 for every half an hour that we run the show, so $750 for the total show. Partially, I'm still testing this framework or these 3-hour shows and whether they make any sense financially, and we'll see if we raise as much money using these kind of shows as we did with the more split shows, with the separation of the news from everything else. And of course, the news used to be a lot shorter. I'm giving you a lot longer, spending a lot more time on news shows. So is that a value to you? Well, that will be determined by the value you provide, right? You will show me whether it's a value to you or not. All right. There's a story out, and you'll hear, I'm sure, a lot about this because people will be complaining about it horrifically, about Israel bombing in Gaza, Israel bombing a school, a particular room within a school, within a school complex that's operated by the United Nations Relief and Workers Agency, UNRWA, the United Nations agency responsible for Palestinian refugees. And Israel bombed a school. I mean, how evil can it get? Now, it turns out that Israel identified that there was a building in the school that was being used by Hamas as a command facility, and that this is a place where they were, planning attacks on Israelis and planning the resistance to the Israeli incursion into various portions of Gaza. This is in the city of Nuseirat in central Gaza, so Israel bombed it after it verified the intelligence and so on. In bombing it, it killed 15, Hamas operatives, 10 of whom were part of the elite naval commando unit, many of whom participated in the October 7th massacre in southern Israel. So, congratulations to Israel for bombing a school. And being willing to bomb it in spite of the fact that there's no question that they are going to be reprimanded by the UN and they are going to be condemned by various international organizations. Hamas, of course, has been consistently for 20 years been using schools and hospitals to hide its operations behind. It knows that Israel is very cautious about bombing these kind of places. It knows that it has the upper hand on the Israelis because the Hamas doesn't care about Palestinian deaths. Israel does, legitimately or illegitimately, it does care. And as a consequence, the Hamas always has the upper hand on Israel because Israel is at a disadvantage because it actually cares about Palestinians, whereas Hamas does not. And if Hamas cared about Palestinians, they wouldn't be hiding in hospitals and in schools. And of course, UNRWA, the UN agency for whatever, UNRWA is just a facilitator of Hamas. UNRWA is in the pocket of Hamas and has been forever in the Gaza Strip, in the pocket of terrorist organizations really since the beginning of its founding of UNRWA in 1949. It's been in the pocket of terrorist organizations and doing their bidding in these Palestinian camps, using these schools to basically educate kids to completely hate on Israel. Oh, another thing that's interesting, because I'm looking at an aerial photograph of the school, which they bombed. And what's interesting is when you see pictures published in the mainstream media about Gaza, what you see is complete and utter destruction, right? They find the places where Israel basically has completely and utterly flattened everything around it. But when you look at this aerial photograph of a different area in Gaza, the buildings are intact. The school, until it was bombed today, completely intact. The trees, it doesn't look like it's gone through a war at all. But of course, that you will never see because that's not what the media wants you to see. It's not what people want you to see. They want you to see just death and destruction everywhere, and Israel has just turned Gaza into Dresden, when indeed it hasn't. I mean, in many respects, I wish it had. This war would be over by now, and Israel would actually have a victory. Okay, a few other foreign policy, foreign topics. You remember we talked about Georgia, the big demonstrations. Georgians have continued to demonstrate, but to no avail. The Georgian parliament yesterday passed, no, it was this morning, just they were in a different time zone. It was this morning passed the foreign intervention law, which mimics the law that was passed in Russia years ago, and is basically represents kind of the demise, one would suspect, of democracy, freedom in Georgia. This is the beginning of the end of any kind of certainly free market movement in Georgia and free elections in Georgia. It really is the beginning of the Russification, is that even a word, of Georgia, which you guys have not been to Tbilisi and to Georgia, or most of you haven't. I'm sure maybe some of you have. But it really is sad. It really, really is sad. I mean, it's an amazing place, an amazing people. And the fact that cowardly authoritarian politicians and intellectual movements have infiltrated it, taking it over, and really now are using it for authoritarian purposes, basically to align it with Vladimir Putin, is just heartbreaking. It really is heartbreaking. It's one of the saddest stories. Again, I was in Tbilisi twice last year. I get large audiences there. Young people, they want freedom. In Georgia in the demonstrations, they are waving European Union flags because to them the European Union represents a future of freedom. Because they would much rather, and I know this comes to shock to some of you, they would much rather live under the European Union than under the Russians. Much rather. So they wave European Union flags as a symbol of freedom, whereas we view it as a symbol of regulatory statism. Because relative to Russia, Europe is an oasis of freedom. And Americans don't get that. So many pro-Russia Americans don't get that. And it is, truly sad, truly sad. And they're alone, right? Nobody cares. Georgia's a small country, 3 million people. I mean, ultimately, the Russians could just take it, and they probably will at some point. They'll just invade it and oppress it. It was part of the Soviet Union. Georgia was. They achieved their independence and their freedom at a real cost. And for a while there, they were probably one of the freest economies, if not the freest economy in the world. or one of the freest in the world. And sadly, that is gone, and it's gonna get a lot worse in the next few years, unless somehow the Georgian people figure out a way in the next election to get rid of this particular government. But I have a feeling from now on, the election in Georgia are going to be rigged. I think that is, unless this movement that has been demonstrated can actually dominate. Right? All right, let's see. More bad news, I guess. Russia is gaining ground in northeastern Ukraine. They're gaining ground in the Kharkiv province. They're not close to Kharkiv, the city yet, but they are close to they've taken over a number of communities in that region, in that area. All of this, in my view, a consequence of the pathetic, just miserable behavior of Republicans, Republican House members. Republican senators did the right thing. Even they were a little slow, but they did the right thing. But Republican House members have hemmed and hawed and delayed, and $62 billion that they're going to spend on the Ukraine war. Who knows where it's going to go, because, we'll see if Ukraine can sustain the effort. It's the delay probably cost $60 billion. I mean, it really is. And this is my point, right? Washington, D.C., the Republican Party is completely and utterly dysfunctional. The one thing it used to do a decent job at in the opposition is restrain spending. That's gone. Restrain new regulation. That's gone. Restrain new subsidies. That's gone. Hold the Democratic president at least accountable for tariffs or anything like that. That is gone. And then they used to be pretty good on foreign policy and helping allies fight wars that we don't want to fight. That's gone. I don't know what Republicans are good for anymore. It's not clear, given the behavior of the House of Representatives over the last year or so. It really isn't clear what they are good for. But, the Republican Speaker of the House had to be bailed out. He couldn't get enough support by Republicans. He had to bribe Democrats to vote for him so he could stay Speaker of the House. That's how dysfunctional the Republican Party has become. Completely dysfunctional. If they hadn't replaced the Speaker of the House months ago, he would have passed the same aid bill that was passed just 6 months later, and the weapons would be already in Ukrainian hands, and this Russian success would have never happened. But instead, we embolden Putin. We make him stronger, and we think that is somehow good for America. That's somehow going to make America safer. It's somehow going to make us less likely to have a World War III. Quite the opposite. The more we embolden Putin, the weaker we are. The more indecisive we are. And the one thing that Biden has been good on is Ukraine, and that's why Republicans wanted to undermine it. All right, final quick story, not to end on a down note. We don't want to end on a down note. We want a positive story to end. This is just fun. I noticed this published. It was published today. Where was it published? It was published in the Financial Times. Financial Times article, or an op-ed, I guess. And I'm just going to read you parts of this because it's pretty stunning. In the UK, the United Kingdom, in 1965, the common age of death was in the first year of life, the most common year of death. Can you imagine that? In 1965, the most common year of death was not in your 80s, it was in your first year. Today, the most common age to die, this is not life expectancy, this is the most common age to die. So if you look at all the deaths, what ages people were when they died, and you look at what's the largest number in a particular country. In 1965, it was 1 year old or less. Today, it's 87 years old. 87 years old. which is just stunning. This startling statistic comes from a remarkable new book. The author writes, it's called The Longevity Imperative by Andrew Scott of the London Business School. He notes, too, that a newborn girl in Japan had a 96% chance of making it to 60. 96% chance of making it to 60. Has a 96% chance of making it to 60. While Japanese women have a life expectancy of nearly 88. Japan is exceptional. But we are living longer everywhere. Global life expectancy, right, is now 76 for women and 71 for men. The New World has been created by the collapse in death rates of the young. Back in 1841, 35% of male children were dead before they reached 20 in the UK. And 77% were dead, who did not survive to reach 70. By 2020, these figures have fallen to 0.7%, less than 1%, and 21%. So over 21%, like 79% of people survive beyond the age of 70. We have largely defeated the causes of early death by means of cleaner water, food, and, hold yourselves, I know this will be shocking, cleaner food and water, vaccination, oh my God, and antibiotics. The author writes, I remember when polio was a great threat. It is almost entirely gone, as is once vastly greater peril of smallpox. Yeah. I mean, it's the real question I think we all face is how much longer can we sustain all this great news given the horrors of our culture and the horrors of our politics? That is the real question. A lot of great things are happening. Here, they're certainly happening across the world. Very positive developments. But are they sustainable if the culture and our politics are going to hell? And it certainly seems like our culture and politics are going to hell. Our options this year are going to be Trump versus Biden. That's going to hell. It doesn't get much worse than that. And if you look at the GOP versus the Democratic Party, it doesn't get much worse than that. So in terms of facilitating all these amazing wonders into the future. All right, that is the news for May 14th, 2024. All right, let's see. Lots of Super Chat questions. I appreciate that. Thank you. Keep them coming. We'll try to answer, or we will answer, whether they're good answers or not, I can't guarantee. Keep the questions coming. If you have questions, don't ask them in the chat. If you have comments to make, if you want me to read them aloud, don't make them in the chat. Bring them right here to the Super Chat. All right. Let's start with the $50 questions, and then we'll go to 20s, and then we'll take the rest. And then after we do this, I will come back with an analysis of a video that Konstantin Kisin, I think is how you pronounce his name, his video on why he is no longer an atheist. He wrote an essay about this, which I commented on, what was it, like 11 months ago, I think, and now he's put out a video that came out a week or two ago. The video is a little different than the essay, so I figured it's a good opportunity to resurrect it. This is going to be a constant issue, because one of the really negative trends in our culture that I think are leading to the demise of the right, are leading to the fact that the right, whatever good elements of the right, are disappearing, is this rush to religion by intellectuals who were atheists, and therefore solidifying the intellectual nature of the right as deeply entrenched with religion. And that cannot be a positive trend, not if you understand religion and its consequences in history and in our world today. Not if you understand Ayn Rand's views about these kind of things. The more the right tries to ground freedom on any kind of basis of religion, the less free we will be. The less free we will be. It's destroying the so-called opposition party. Valkaran has a sudden desire, has made a conscious decision to believe in Bigfoot. I mean, that's your right. I mean, everybody should believe in what they want to believe. It's an issue of faith, and what can I do? Anyway, so let's jump into the questions. Silvanos, $50. Thank you, Silvanos. Wait a second. Let me just do the stickers. Or the stickers. Jose Maria Grandos Garcia. Thank you. Really appreciate the sticker. And that was your first super chat. So really appreciate that. We got a few first super chatters today. Matthew Blakely, we'll get you a question in a little bit. Also, first super chat. Really appreciate that. Mark Goodkin, not first super chat at all. Thank you for the support all these years. Did a sticker as well. Really appreciate that. And indeed, if everybody right now did a $5 sticker, we would raise all the money for the 3 hours Anyway, Silvanos, hi, Yaron. Being super busy with work, but here's to catching you live. Keep it up. Thank you, Silvanos. Really, really appreciate the support. Michael, do unfree areas tend to have giant apartment complexes and subway systems rather than single-family homes and cars? It makes it easier. It makes it easier to concentrate and control populations. Look at Russia and China. They mostly have these monster apartment buildings. I think it certainly has something to do with unfreedom, right? So, because what you need, to some extent it's got to do with control, but it also has to do with the fact that people are poor. And you want to have an egalitarian outcomes. You want to have equality of outcome. So the last thing you want is for people to have different kinds of houses on different types of land. Indeed, where would they get that from? There's no private property. They have no wealth in authoritarian regimes. It's all controlled by the government. And so in order to facilitate housing millions and millions of people cheaply, and where they're all the same, you build these concrete monstrosities where every apartment they're blocks. There's no architecture. There's nothing to make them look pretty. And the apartments are basically the same. Maybe they vary in size for different size families, but they're basically all the same. So nobody can say, I have a nicer apartment than you do, because they're all exactly the same. And, since, from an aesthetic perspective, you think about it, since Marxists are materialists, then aesthetic value, beauty, is unimportant. What matters is it was called brutalism, right? What matters is the functionality, and that is all. It has, there is no value to aesthetic appeal, because aesthetic appeal is spiritual, and the spiritual values don't matter. They don't count. So you see that even in socialist sculpture. Socialist sculpture is super, super materialistic. Big muscles, no expressions, everybody looks the same. It's collectivistic and materialistic. That is the essence of socialist and Nazi. Socialist and Nazi sculpture almost looked exactly the same. Now, one of the ways in which you could see in the 2000s that China was not communist, and still you can see that China's not communist, it might be authoritarian in a variety of different ways, is that China of the last 40, 50 years is not egalitarian. It's not committed to equality of outcome. So in China, there are beautiful condo buildings, there are areas where people have beautiful houses. So if people do live in condos, they live in really nice condos, but there are also slums where people have built little shanties. There isn't that, at least in a modern period, there was during Mao, there isn't the same kind of brutalism. There isn't the kind of same, everybody is the same. Even in the mass developments of apartment complexes all over China, they have a little bit of character, those buildings. They're still trying to be cheap and try to sell everybody an apartment, but they're selling apartments and they're marketing them, and they have to market amenities, and they have to, so it's an actual sales process, which was not true in Mao's China and the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe. So when you go to Moscow, I don't know what city Tucker Carlson went to, but you want to go to Moscow, outside of the center, which is where, where Red Square is, and some of the ancient old Russian buildings, and then a few modern buildings that represent kind of the wealth of the oligarchs. Once you go outside of that, and certainly on the drive in from the airport, I think Moscow has 2 or 3 airports, I can't remember, but the one that's further out, the international airports, the scenery going in is pretty oppressive and depressing. It is brutalist, concrete, apartment complexes that represent aesthetically exactly the nature of the Soviet Union and to some extent of Russia today. And that is what Tucker Carlson should have shown about Moscow. They should have gone to one of those apartments, should have gone to those buildings. He should have filmed the building and the apartment inside. He should have shown how actual Russians live, not a grocery store in the richest part in town. Granted, he's never been to a grocery store in America, but a grocery store in the nicest part of town, and the one subway station and system, which they keep clean and everything for propaganda videos, and have been doing so since the time of the Soviet Union. He should have gone to where real Russians live and operate, gone out of that little. It reminds me of the people who go to North Korea, and they go on tour in North Korea, and they go, oh, it's not too bad, because they have been shown only what the North Korean regime wants them to see. And they don't see anything beyond that. They're not allowed to leave. They're not allowed to go on their own. I mean, it was like Tucker Carlson had bought a ticket to an organized tour run by the Putin's administration, just to show him the highlights of Moscow, of a rich, prosperous Moscow, and completely ignore the fact that Russians, by any measure, by any objective measure, are some of the poorest people in Europe. All right. And certainly Moscow is so much less impressive than Shanghai or Guangzhou or any Chinese city. I mean, Moscow is like ridiculously primitive as compared to the major Chinese cities. I don't know how long that'll last. We'll see. All right, James Taylor. Can there be technological improvement and standard of living increases even under severe statism? There were technological improvements in the Nazi Germany between the 30s and 40s. Even the Middle Ages saw pockets of innovation. Yes, you can see pockets of innovation. In the case of the Nazis in Germany, what you saw is scientists and engineers trained in freer times, focused on particular projects, could advance those projects given that they still had the semblance of those older times. If the Nazi Germany had survived another 10 years, you would have seen a slow decrease in the amount of innovation they were capable of. They're just not capable of it under that kind of regime. And most of the innovation that they engaged in was marginal improvement to innovation they already had. And indeed, by the end of the war, and Victor Davis Hanson's latest book on World War II has a lot of illustrations of this. By the end of World War II, even though Germany had basically got a head start and really focused on military production. By really by the middle to end of World War II, the Allies had better planes. I mean, think about the fact that the Luftwaffe was basically destroyed and annihilated to the point where American and British bombers could bomb anywhere in Europe without being attacked by German airplanes because they had been crushed. Taking account the fact that the Germans never built a kind of a bomber like the B-17, never mind the more advanced bombers that came later. They never got there. They tried. They wanted to. They wanted to be able to attack London with bombers. They couldn't build it. They couldn't build the big bombers that the United States was building and improving and making better from a dime. You remember, the United States didn't have a big military buildup and then a war came out, which is what Nazis did. The United States kind of was not doing military buildup, and then the war hit it. Suddenly, it had to build aircraft carriers, it had to build tanks, it had to build, planes, strategic bombers, and they did it off of nothing. Suddenly, just like that. I mean, the achievement of American technology and British technology, breaking the code, radar, in World War II, is stunning as compared to not that much happening on the Nazi or the Japanese side. Not that much. I mean, think about the aircraft carriers that the United States could deploy quickly and effectively. Germany never built an aircraft carrier, and the Japanese were losing so many of them they couldn't build new ones during the war, whereas the United States was building massive, large numbers of aircraft carriers during the war to both deploy to the Pacific and the Atlantic, particularly to the Pacific. Yeah, I mean, there is some improvement that can happen because of the momentum of a freer time. In the Middle Ages, there was some very marginal, very small, if you look at the scope of history, particularly in areas that were a little bit freer, some parts of Italy city-states where there was less of a centralized authority that could regiment these things. But if you compare innovation in the Middle Ages to innovations just 300 years later, it's just not the same universe. You're not talking in the same way. And the same is true if you compare Nazi Germany to the US, or if you compare the Soviet Union to the United States. I mean, the Soviet Union had some things they innovated on. They got to space before the Americans did. But in comparison, it's just no. And most of that innovation was because of the German scientists that they kidnapped from Germany and took to Russia and got them to work on the rocket technology. That's basically it. American airplanes beat the Germans in every category. They were beaten. So authoritarianism destroys innovation. It doesn't mean it goes to zero immediately. It fades out over time. It takes a generation or two to go to zero, but it goes to zero. The mind requires freedom, and innovation and economic progress are a consequence of the human mind. And if you don't provide freedom to the human mind, innovation will indeed disappear. And again, you might get little pockets of stuff, but it doesn't grow, because even if I invent something like in the Middle Ages, by the way, a lot of the innovation in the Middle Ages was a product of breakthroughs happening in the Arab world that was being imported into the Middle Ages. And one of the reasons that Italy was the most innovative place in the Middle Ages is because they had the most contact with the Muslim world. They had the most contacts with the Arab empires and later on with the Ottoman Empire. They got the innovation, so they got math. Do you know that up until, 14th century or something like that, for the most part in Europe, they were still adding, subtracting, and multiplying using Roman numerals? Do you know how hard that is? Do you know how impossible that makes any real development in math? How impossible it makes to have algebra or anything? And it's only bringing the concept of zero and ultimately the base 10 numerical system from from the Muslim world, which got it from India, could you get real math? How do you advance in math using Roman numerals? It's impossible. So you needed that in order to advance. But that they got from the Arabs. They got it early from the Arabs, but it didn't catch on in Europe for a long time because Europe was so backward, and Europe was so, focused mentally on conserving the past and not adopting new stuff, particularly not adopting new stuff that came from the pagans or from the apostates, the Islamic apostates. So, yeah, I mean, these things do not. The Middle Ages were a disaster. The Medici Library is already the Renaissance. Right? You're already starting to get out of there. But that takes a long time. Double entry bookkeeping was an innovation brought to Europe through the number system from the Arab world. Again, I think I've said this in the past. For 1,000 years, basically from somewhere around 400 AD to 1400 AD, no astronomical observations in Europe. None, zero, zilch. In particularly in Western Europe, there's still some in the Roman Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, which is called I'm blanking on names, but no real innovation for 1,000 years. That's just astronomical observations, which people seem to do. People interested in the stars, they start documenting it. Scientists seem to connect to that. But businessmen, thank you, Ian. Almost no innovation in medicine. The Arabs were discovering the blood and the circulatory system, nothing for 1,000 years. They were still reading Greek, the Greeks and what they had to say about medicine. They made no innovation for close to 1,000 years. I mean, the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages, really brutal when it comes to the human mind, to innovation, to science, to progress. Brutal. All right. No, it's the Byzantine Empire. The Eastern Roman Empire is the Byzantine Empire. The Holy Roman Empire is the Western Empire. It's the Western Holy Roman Empire. All right, Jennifer, I think AI will be great for information and assistance. Do you think, though, for psychological health, it is important for humans to interact with each other for real, that is, biologically? Yes, but only so much. I mean, if AI is super efficient, then, I would rather interact with it than most human beings who are super inefficient. So there's certain things you can't do without other human beings: friendship, love, and just the camaraderie that's involved in working on projects together. But there's certain things that, please get rid of the middleman. Please get rid of the stupid clerk that has no idea what they're doing, or the people at IKEA who've been telling my wife that yes, the furniture piece she bought is available, it's in stock, and it's going to be shipped any day now. It's this shipper and that shipper and this installer and that installer, and it just goes on and on and on until 10 days later she finds out no, they just don't have it, and nobody knew they don't have it. I have a feeling an AI would get it, would just say we don't have it in stock now. We will renew the stock in late June, and we will get it to you in July, which is what ultimately the person did. But AI would be 1,000 times better because it would be linked directly to the database. It wouldn't have an incentive to be nice and lie to you. It would just tell you the truth. Or, like in Puerto Rico, there's this habit people have of they never say no. So if you text somebody and you ask them a question and the answer is no to it, they just will go dead silent. They won't respond. And it's like an AI would just say no, right? That's good. So there's some things that I want interaction with machines because they're just so much more straightforward and honest. But for other stuff, I mean, I think it's pretty pathetic if people start falling in love and having friendships with machines. I mean, that is sad. It would be a sad state of the world. So human interaction will always be necessary. And of course, don't forget Dugin warned us in the clip I told you about. Dugin warned us that the next step of individualism is, it's kind of a post-human era in which we and machines kind of merge, and then there's the challenge, right? But that's the best of all worlds. I'm all for transhumanism. I'm all for moving on and making things better, not only genetically engineering wise, but also, if I can have my interaction with the AI, through a chip in my brain, all the more power to it. So, all cool. We want to keep moving forward. We want to keep getting better. Stagnation is for animals, not for human beings. Human beings constantly evolve, not evolve through biological, natural, random selection, but they evolve through the use of their reason to make their lives better and to make the world better. This is why we don't die at childbirth anymore. We don't die in mass before the age of 1. We live well into our 80s, not because nature wants that, not because nature's programmed us that way, not because nature has created a being that can do that. It hasn't, quite the contrary. If you just leave it to nature, we die, half of us die before the age of 10. It's science, reason, that has made us live long. So if science and reason can make us live better in other ways, all the power to them. Why would you turn that away? Right? I mean, all right, Matthew. This is Matthew's first Super Chat question. Hello, Yaron. I just got an academic paper published on Hayek. Emailed it to you. Would be honored if you read it. When did you email it to me? Email it to me again, just so now I have a context for the email. Or if you emailed it right now, then I haven't seen it yet. But okay, great. Yeah, happy to look at it. Absolutely. Harper Campbell. Perhaps objectivists need to be more obnoxious, not less. We're right. They're wrong. They are holding humanity back. Get on board or go to hell should be our attitude always. You're going to alienate a lot of people for absolutely no reason. And it isn't true that it's get on board or go to hell. I mean, there are a lot of people who are not going to get on board. 99.9% of people, humanity is not going to get on board anytime soon. And yet, I still want them to develop GPT 4.0. I still want Bryan Caplan to write books on immigration and build, baby, build, even though he's not getting on board with objectivism. I mean, it would be ridiculous to say the only valuable human beings out there are people who are willing to get on board with objectivism. Everybody else go to hell. I mean, that's just not the reality. I depend on my food supply on people who are not objectivist. I depend on technology on people who are not objectivist. I depend on my life on people who my doctors are not objectivist. And we're going to tell them to go to hell because they're not getting on board. So no, I don't think that is an attitude that helps you. And I don't think that's an attitude that helps you in life, right? In life, you've got to say to people, you've got to have the approach of somebody provides you a value, thank you. Whether they objectivist or not objectivist, thank you. Thank you for providing me a value. Yeah, it's just but that creates a kind of attitude that says everybody who's not on board with us on objectivism is worthless. But it's not true. It's not true. Many of them are creating values for us. The people who are worthless, there are a lot of people who are worthless, but not all of them. And I don't think it helps to be obnoxious. Who gains from it? Who wins? Who do you attract? Right? I mean, yeah, if the communist walks into a room, be obnoxious. But what, to be obnoxious to everybody who's not an objectivist, there's no upside to it. Like the obnoxiousness doesn't speed up the process. I could understand it. If the obnoxiousness sped up the process, then kind of makes sense. Jeff, do you think you could use ChatGPT to point out logical fallacies in your thinking or critique potential business ideas? At some point, sure. Maybe now, I don't know. I don't know enough about ChatGPT. But certainly at some point, it should be able to do that. At least within a particular scope, a particular type of problems with your business idea. There might be areas where it won't be able to because it won't quite understand the human aspect of it. But for some things, like, I don't know, your financial projections don't make sense or whatever. For certain things that are easily breaking down, I think it could be a great help. Adam, would you interview Jakub Pachocki, the chief developer of OpenAI's ChatGPT services? I mean, I would if he would be willing to be interviewed. I mean, I can certainly try. I'm making a list of non-objectivists I want to interview, and I'll put him on the list, and get Angela to try to get us as many of them as possible. So I think in the future we're going to have a lot of non-objectivist interviews and with people doing interesting things in the world. We'll add those too. All right. Oyvind, have you seen the news about microtubules using quantum effects in the brain? Studies show it gives rise to consciousness and that it works as a form of indeterminism. Pretty interesting. God, that's so above my pay grade. I have no idea. I have no idea what any of that means even. I don't know what microtubules are, and are they seeing this in the brain, or are they creating it? And if they're creating it outside of the brain, how do they know it's conscious? How do they measure consciousness? By what parameter can they tell it's conscious? So, but certainly, it's likely that quantum physics has something to do with how the brain works. It wouldn't be surprising at all. I just don't know. I don't know how and what, and I never will know because I'm just not a scientist. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We will have Keith Lockitch on I can't remember. I think it's next Monday. Next Monday we'll have Keith Lockitch on, who teaches science at the Ayn Rand University. We'll be talking about science education, what you need to know about science, what's important that you know, and how much and how much should you know, how much do you need to know, and what issues in science matter. So we'll talk about a bunch of stuff and what he teaches at the Ayn Rand University. Apollo Zeus says, is wokeism a danger right now? Sure, of course it's a danger. It's a danger because it dominates the universities. It's a danger because it is the universities, right? It's very, very prevalent in the universities. In that sense, it's a danger because it's constantly on an ongoing basis corrupting our kids' minds. I think it's slightly on the defensive. I just read some university reallocated a big chunk of DEI funding to do something else completely unrelated. So because I think the different woke agenda items are under attack and are being questioned and are in retreat. But the reality is that these woke professors are still teaching our kids and still destroying their minds and still corrupting the youth, and that'll have consequences over the long run that are pretty horrific. So yes, wokeism is definitely a danger. It continues to be a danger as long as it's what is being taught at a university. I like identitarianism. I think wokeism is too fuzzy of a term. It's not clear what it is. But yeah, I think we generally have a sense of it, but only a sense. Scott says, you said debating mixed economy types gets too much into the weeds, but isn't it true that that's where the minds can be changed? No, I don't think the minds are ever changed in the weeds. I don't think the minds are ever changed in the weeds. I think the minds are changed in principle. The minds are changed on the principled issue. And it's very hard to prove to somebody, for example, that if we didn't have regulation today, everything would be so much better. unless they buy a certain principle, unless they're willing to accept a certain principled approach to thinking, they're not going to accept the argument, no, regulation is actually destructive. Because particularly in the world in which we live, life is pretty good. I keep emphasizing how many good things there are in the world. And this is a mixed economy. So how do I know things would be better if we didn't have a mixed economy, if you had pure capitalism? For that, you have to rise to the level of what do you call it? To the level of principles. And it's very difficult to argue with a mixed economy person about principles because they're not interested. They don't want principles. The whole point of a mixed economy is compromise. So if you debate a socialist, at least you're debating at the level of principles. Now, the goal of debating a socialist is not to convince socialists, but the goal is to convince curious people. And there are lots of people out there who are not committed socialists, who are curious about socialism versus capitalism. They're trying to figure it out. They're trying to make up their minds. They're trying to understand the world. And those are the people you want. People who are already committed to the mixed economy. People who are already committed to communism. People who are already you're unlikely to change them. It's the people who are curious, and the people who are curious about a mixed economy, unless you can have the principled discussion, you're just not going to change them. They're just not going to, you're not going to move the needle. Because they just don't want to talk about what really matters. They orient and they move the discussion away from the principles towards the mixed economy, towards the concretes of the mixed economy. Now, that doesn't mean you don't debate them. You debate everybody. I mean, I try to debate pretty much everybody because you never know who's listening. You never know what will change somebody's mind. You'll never know, what will actually get a response. But the reality is that it's much more productive to debate people on the left and on the right who are willing to talk about principles. So it's very useful to debate people on the right on individualism versus collectivism, like debate people who are pro-national conservatism. It's very good because you're dealing with abstract principles that can be concretized, but abstract principles, you're not talking about the weeds. And it's very useful to debate socialists. And I think I've had more impact on people by debating socialists than debating mixed economy types. Doesn't mean I wouldn't debate mixed economy types. I'll debate, as you've seen over the years, pretty much anybody on pretty much any topic. I'm just saying what's more effective and what's less effective. I just don't think it's very effective. That's all. Because they won't let it, right? The mixed economists, on principle, reject principle. And it's very difficult to debate somebody who's slippery like that. Whoops, what did I just do? Yes, all right. All right, Rob. Yeah, keep the questions coming. Particularly $20, $50, $100 questions are particularly encouraged. Rob says, UK elections later this year, are the Tories worth voting for? I'm tired of them being in power, but Labour looks worse, and Keir has a communist history. I mean, I don't know what you do. I don't know who you should vote for. I mean, generally, I'd say, I think, I mean, this is how I look at it. The Conservatives deserve to lose. I mean, the Labour doesn't deserve to win, but the Conservatives deserve to lose. So you can't. I don't think you can vote for them because they deserve to lose. So maybe you stay home because you can't vote for the left. And the reality is, your vote doesn't matter. So why put yourself? It doesn't matter in the big picture. Why put yourself through the mental horrors of trying to figure out who to vote for when your vote doesn't matter, and the Conservatives are going to lose big time, and they deserve to lose big time. So it's not like you want to support the good guys, right? And the reality is that the left in Germany deserves to lose, and Macron probably deserves to win given the alternatives that he possesses. So you have to look at every country, and every country it's going to be a little different. In spite of Scott's attempts to present me as a caricature, he can't because, he's just not competent enough to be able to do that. The reality is that in every country, it's a little different. In the United States, Biden, for example, right now, deserves to lose. He's done thing after thing after thing that's moved him further and further and further out to the left to the point where he deserves to lose. Do we deserve Donald Trump as president? No. Does Donald Trump deserve to win the presidency? No. But does Biden deserve it? No. So we're again stuck in this crazy situation where if you're going to vote, you have to think about which one do you think will do the less damage long run? And that still could be Trump in spite of how awful Biden is. But it's getting more and more difficult to make that argument as Biden is becoming worse and worse and worse. And one has to reflect forward for another 4 years of his deteriorating mental health. Again, not that he ever was particularly sharp. And the greater and greater influence of the far left on him. I mean, all these things have to be considered. You have to weigh all these options, but it's very difficult when your options are so bleak, when the options are so pathetic. But in the UK, it's pretty clear. The Conservatives won a massive victory last time, a massive victory, historical. They had full control of the House of Parliament. And what did they do with that? Worse than nothing. They made the UK worse off. They cut the worst Brexit deal possible. They, drove the US into inflationary recession. In everything that they did, all their promises, they reneged on. The one time when, maybe a budget proposed that maybe made sense, rejected immediately. So, I mean, it's just the Conservatives are being so pathetic, given that they got this mandate to do amazing thing, and they got Brexit. And Brexit gave them the tool to do whatever they wanted. And what did they do? Nothing good, literally nothing good. So they deserve to lose. And then, could Labour be that much worse? Probably not, because Labour's moved to the center. So you have to tolerate a few years of Labour. So maybe we can pray and hope that Conservatives get better. But if they win, they certainly won't get better. And this is the point I made about Trump. If Trump had won a second term or lost by a small margin, he won't get better, and the people around him won't get better. That's exactly what happened. He won by a small margin. He convinced everybody it was a margin. He was cheated out of it. And as a consequence, he got worse, and the people around him got a lot worse. And now they're going to win, which is just going to quadruple the impact of MAGA on the world, which is just horrific. So anyway, sorry, I don't have any easy answers politically for you guys in terms of who you should vote for. Jason, did you ever say debating the mixed economy gets too much into the weeds as a general axiom, void of context, applicable to every debater? No, I don't think I said that. I said generally, people I debate on the mixed economy tend to go into the weeds because a whole point of defending the mixed economy is not defending principle. And therefore, they move away from any principled discussion and move into discussing just this particular or that particular, and you can't prove it because there's no counterfactual, and show me in history or show me in another country. It's all becomes that, right? The difference between Sweden and America and the welfare state, where I keep saying there's not a big difference between the welfare state and Sweden and America. And they say, no, there's a huge difference. And it's just, you get these conversations that lead nowhere, and people listening to it gain very little from the conversation because it's leading nowhere. Yeah, that I think is what I said. But do I remember exactly what I said? No. Catherine, thank you for saying this. I assume that was my thing against tariffs and against taxes. Jared, if hell were real, each occupant would be a shining reminder that God has failed. Well, I mean, how do you that's very arrogant of you, James. I mean, how do you know God has failed? Maybe the purpose of God, maybe his purpose in the universe is to cause people to do hellish things. I mean, once you accept God, all bets are off. You don't know what his motivation is. You don't know why he wants what he wants. You don't know what his ultimate goal is. So you can't say that, what did you say, that he's failed. Maybe he's succeeded. Maybe this is exactly the result he wanted. It has to be, because he's omnipotent, omniscient. He knows what the result will be, and this is what he wanted. Liam says, what does a guy like Warren Buffett know that you don't, that makes him so much more successful? Does he simply have a much higher IQ that can handle abstractions and long-range outcome better? I think that's part of it. He's super smart. I don't know if he's smarter than me. Probably, likely. He's got a very high intelligence. I don't think IQ is necessarily the right measure, but he's got a very high intelligence. He has the capacity to integrate a lot of information and project it into the future. He has focused his mind on a particular problem. He's focused his mind, which I have not, on identifying a particular problem, which is which companies over the long run are going to do well. And I have not. Most of us have not. So he's very focused, got one problem he's trying to solve, figured out through use of his unbelievably smart brain, through integration, what that looks like, projected it to the future, and acted on it. And that's what makes him extraordinary. Now, he could be just lucky. We wouldn't be able to differentiate between those two outcomes. But it could be that he's got all those traits and he's got all those abilities, and this is what it's led to. And I never did any of that. So he's more successful in investing than I am, because that's not what I did. It's not how I approach things. And he's probably smarter than me. Clark, does Hong Kong have zoning laws? God. I think so. Indeed, most of the land in Hong Kong was government owned, and I think it's almost all the construction in Hong Kong is long-term leases. Long-term leases. Same as Singapore. Singapore, almost all housing in Singapore is owned by the state. So again, both countries are not perfect in terms of how free they are. But obviously, in terms of what they build, there's a lot more freedom in Hong Kong than in a lot of other places. I'll be right back. It gets super hot in this room when I'm speaking, and and my wife puts the thermostat up because it gets too cold for her, so I have to remember to put it down. All right, Apollo Zeus. I used to play a lot of card games as a kid, but I can't play poker. Any tips how to learn? Well, anybody can play poker, but to be good at poker, you have to learn the odds, and you have to kind of memorize them, and you have to be able to fake and lie and effectively without giving it away. And you have to have kind of a high risk tolerance, but it's a super easy game to play. So you just get a video on YouTube on how to play poker, and it'll teach you. Clark, what do you make of the argument that Houston, Texas is ugly because it has no zoning laws? I mean, as compared to what? I don't think Houston is particularly ugly. It's flat, it's big. It doesn't have just one downtown. It has a number of these centers. Is that ugly by what standard? I don't think the architecture is particularly ugly. Compared to what? Compared to Dallas? Compared to is Dallas prettier than Houston? Is Newark, New Jersey? I mean, what is the comparison point? And Houston, over the last few years, I think has gotten prettier. They built up the downtown because they've gotten richer, because there's more money there, and the more money is, the prettier it gets. So I don't think Houston. I mean, what makes Houston, in a sense, not particularly pretty is that it's just flat. It's just, there's nothing there. It's just flat. And I like cities in terms of beauty that have hills and some interesting geography. This is why my favorite city in the world is, in these terms, is Rio de Janeiro, because it has the most interesting geography. So, yeah, no, I don't think it's ugly. I don't think it's ugly. Clark says, how do zoning laws in New York City compare to San Francisco and LA? I don't know. I think historically, New York City has been certainly open to building skyscrapers, although that has changed through certain administration. But generally, they're pro-skyscrapers. You see that in the skyscrapers. The reality is that in San Francisco, there are very, very, very stringent height regulations, restrictions on height of buildings, and it's really bad. There's also big restrictions on demolishing older buildings and building new stuff. There's also restrictions about residential, what do you call it? How many people can live on a particular plot of land, in a sense, right? So I think they're far more restrictive in San Francisco and LA than they are in New York City, where you see skyscrapers and all kinds of buildings going up. But, you know, and I don't know what the zoning laws are like in New York City. I'm sure they're pretty bad there. I'm sure they're bad, but they're nowhere near as bad as in San Francisco and LA. And even LA is different. It's going to be different in downtown than in other parts of the city. But there's no question that zoning and regulations and building codes and building regulations and all of that stuff is what keeps housing super expensive. Clark says, sorry I missed the Bryan Caplan show last night, but I had these questions for him. Does rent control only exist in blue states and cities? I don't know if rent control only exists in blue states and cities. I'd be surprised. Rent control is one of those things that, and most cities are blue, so it's hard to find a red city. What's a red city? I mean, in the deep south you have red cities, but pretty much everywhere else, cities are blue. Even in Texas, I think San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, and Houston, all blue cities. So I don't know where you're going to find enough samples to evaluate red cities, because there are just not that many of them. Maybe, I don't know if Nashville, Memphis, maybe those are red. No, Austin is blue. Austin is blue. Houston is blue. They're all Democrats. Cities are places where Democrats live. I mean, that is urban centers are where Democrats live. Austin is very blue. Austin is like dark blue. Right? Michael, real adults don't regulate. Yeah, real adults who treat other people like real adults don't regulate. Pamela, my son Stephen, looking forward to seeing you at OCON next month. Yeah, tell him to come up and introduce himself. Andrew, how do grown men who hover around Trump, many of whom are accomplished businessmen, statesmen, allow themselves to become fawning mouthpieces? Is there any self-awareness there? They relate to Trump because at least some of them are very similar to Trump. In a lot of them have a certain sense of a certain narcissism. I see quite a few people that have similar traits to Trump. Some of them more successful than him because they've channeled it in better ways, but they have similar to that. Part of them just think it's cool to be around somebody who's going to be president. You know, it's the celebrity effect. You see it across everywhere. But some of them are aware of it, and it's strategic. They want something out of it, and some of them are not. I mean, what I find really, I mean, you brought this up. I was going to say this in the news. One of the truly, I think, I don't know. Talk about disgusting political displays. One of the most disgusting political displays is going on right now in New York, where every day that Trump goes for this trial, some other senator or congressman who's super important shows up and shows his support for Trump in his hush money trial to a porn star. This is the modern Republican Party. This is Trump's party. It's like everybody has now to go to the courtroom in New York where a porn star is accusing him of whatever she's accusing him and describing their sex acts, has to go there and kiss his ring. Like, these people have to go and sit in the courtroom while his attorney Cohen describes how truly sleazy Donald Trump is. And they have to go there and kiss his ring. I mean, you saw this. Senators were there. Congressman, the Speaker of the House was there, I think, yesterday. It's truly disgusting. Again, shows how low and authoritarian, right? This is the man in charge, and you got to kiss the ring. The Republican Party has become. And if he goes to jail, he'll just be running the Republican Party from jail. And nothing will change and nobody will care. They'll just go every day. A different senator will go there and kiss the ring. He won't go to jail for very long if he goes. I don't think he will go to jail. It's really disgusting. And but it's disgusting in a way that it shows how much control he has over these people, how mindless they are. I mean, take the Speaker of the House, who is a evangelical, Bible-thumping Christian. And he went there to hear about the salacious relationship between Donald Trump and his various affairs that he hired Cohen to cover up for him. And he's going to defend Trump and do a press conference afterwards and defend Trump to the hill. And how can you respect these people? How can they respect themselves? Zero self-respect. Zero, nada self-respect. Truly horrible and disgusting. You can't imagine this happening in the Republican Party 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Just unimaginable that it would happen to the Republican Party. And here it is. It's right here. And it's not changing the mind of anybody in terms of their support. Quite the contrary, it seems to be increasing the support. So maybe, this is what the American people want. This is what the American people desire. This is what they actually want. Scott says, thanks, Obama. No, it's thanks, Bush. It's thanks, Bush. We only got Obama because of Bush, because Bush was so pathetic that we got Obama. This is why if you'd followed my advice in 2004, we would never have gotten Obama. And if we'd never gotten Obama, we'd never got Trump. And a lot of this would somehow maybe potentially be subverted. So it's not about Obama, it's about Bush. Yeah. It's about the hanging chads in Florida. Because if Al Gore had won, we would have never got all this crap. So it's Bush. It's, I really do wish John Kerry would have won in 2004. Because as bad as Kerry was, he was nowhere near where we are today with both the Democrats and the Republicans. All right. Let's see. Yeah, okay, so take a break here. I want to remind you of a few things. We've got the Ayn Rand Institute is sponsoring this show. I think tomorrow and the day after. If you go to aynrand.org/start here, there's a flash sale for OCON. 20% off your registration to be at OCON live in person. 20% off. It's a 2-day sale. Go to aynrand.org/start here. OCON, I think is amazing. I'm glad Pamela's son Stephen is coming. I hope many of you are going to be there and we can hang out. I hope some of you who weren't planning to come will take advantage of this flash sale and come in spite of that and in spite of you not planning. Particularly if you live in California, you have no excuses, but really anywhere you live, you should try to make the trek out. It's a beautiful time to be in California. It's perfect weather. And, Anaheim's, you're literally across the street from Disneyland. So if you want to jump over to Disneyland during the conference, you can. So come over. And if you are coming to OCON, then please consider coming to the public speaking seminar workshop that I am doing on the 19th, the day after OCON. You can sign up for that at yaronbrookshow.com. Just click on the workshop tab, and all the information you need is right there. And I hope to get. I'm shooting for 10 people. There's still a significant number of slots available. I'm hoping to get at least 6 or 7 people to make this all worthwhile. So. Please consider signing up and coming over. A lot of personal, hands-on, one-on-one attention you get on this. So it's an opportunity to hang out with me, but also to get my feedback on your public speaking skills. Also, if you want ad-free podcast, ad-free audio, you go to yaronbrookshow.com and you can sign up there through... the members tab, and you can sign up with Spreaker. It's $10 a month, and you can get all the podcasts that I do without any ads. You get them directly on the Spreaker app, and you can follow the Yaron Brook Show on the Spreaker app. Let's see. I did want to offer something more broadly, see if you guys are interested. So I'm just going to throw this out there. And generally, if you want to communicate with me, the best thing is Yaron at yaronbrookshow.com. Yaron at yaronbrookshow.com. Anyway, if you'd like personal coaching, any kind of personal coaching, one-time thing, a series of them, you're doing a startup and you want something, any kind of personal coaching from me, then write me an email. We can figure out cost and time and all of that. But basically, just send me an email that you're interested, and I will send you details. Yaron at yaronbrookshow.com. So personal coaching, I've decided to devote a few hours a week, if there's interest in it, to doing that, if you guys want it, right? So available starting anytime, starting really now. All right, finally, we are $100 short for the second hour. So if $250 an hour is the standard, so we're $100 short of the second hour, and we have $250 more to raise for the third hour. So please consider making a contribution. You can do so by just doing a sticker and supporting the show that way, or by asking a question, which I'll get to later on. But it would be great if you guys trade value for value. This show doesn't exist without support from you guys. So please consider supporting it. If we don't start making these goals, then I'll have to think about changing the format and figuring out a different format. But it's in one way or another, we have to fund this show. We have to make this show work financially. All right, let's jump into Konstantin Kisin. Konstantin Kisin has a very popular, podcast, YouTube show, Trigonometry, that he has with his co-host out of London. They don't seem interested in interviewing me. I've tried. I'll keep trying, I guess, when I go to London. But his is has been a kind of a right of center, atheist, right of center perspective over the years. He did a very famous interview with Sam Harris that got Sam Harris in deep trouble. But he's interviewed a lot of big names and is, I think, in the podcasting world, very, very, very influential and very big. Big. Anyway, there's been these discussions about atheism, culturally Christians, Dawkins did, Ian Hersey Lee becoming, converting or rejecting atheism for the sake of embracing Christianity, and you're seeing more and more discussion about that. Dawkins again saying that he is now culturally a Christian, even though he's an atheist, and you're seeing more and more of, I'd say, the secular world retracting, entrenching, and some of them just straight out embracing Christianity. Others saying, yeah, we get the appeal of Christianity. We can't actually become Christian, but we get it. We understand it. And there seems to be almost no voices saying, no, wait a minute. What are you talking about? Christianity's awful. And you should reject it. And atheism doesn't give you a philosophy. You should embrace a good philosophy. That voice is not there, so I guess I'm it, or there may be a few others that are doing this, but not many. Paul Uzu says, they've had Stephen Hicks on a couple of times. Maybe they think that one objective is enough. There's a difference between, Stephen Hicks and myself. I am much more obnoxious, to go back to a question out there. I'm much more strident, and I'm much more controversial. Stephen does it all very lightly and very softly and very, in as much of an unoffensive as you can. They don't want my attitude. I mean, some people don't mind it, like Lex Friedman, obviously, but some people don't like my attitude, and that's fine. They've also had Alex Epstein, I think, on. So they've had Alex, but my attitude towards religion, my attitude towards these other things are not easy for these people to take in. It's interesting. I just saw a clip of Jordan Peterson, which would explain why I may never be on his podcast, right? Even though people are trying to convince him to have me on, I might never be on, because he said that of all the podcasts he's done, the one he disliked the most was the podcast he did with Destiny. And he was asked why he was so opposed, why he didn't like the podcast he did with Destiny. And he said because Destiny was combative. Destiny had a certain perspective and in a sense was trying to convince Jordan Peterson of that perspective. And Jordan doesn't want that. He wants to have, he doesn't want people who think they know the truth. He wants people to have a conversation about stuff. You can disagree, but you have to be, just converse about it rather than have a vigorous, he doesn't want debate. He doesn't want a kind of a vigorous debate. He views that as childish. I can understand why he wouldn't want me on, because I take it more as, this is how I see the truth. I'm not playing games here. This is not about, let's find a middle ground, or let's have a conversation. But my point of view is pretty straightforward. It's pretty clear. It's not equivocal. Anyway, that was interesting that I saw that recently from Jordan Peterson. I forgot to make this announcement. That's right. Maybe because I don't have. Yes. If you want to attend, talk about Peterson, right? If you want to attend my Peterson Academy class, the class I'm giving for Peterson Academy, then you can, right? You can be in a live audience there, and you can sit through the whole thing, and you can see how they do it and the process, and experience, me teaching and all of that. I'm doing 8 hours on finance, the history of finance, what finance is, the nature of finance. 8 hours on finance for the Peterson Academy. It's in 2 weeks, and you can sign up. I think you go to petersonacademy.com/Brook. petersonacademy.com/Brook. And you have to apply to be there. They don't let riffraff in, I guess. But, last time we had a small class, which was fine. But it would be great if we had more people, and it'd be great if I got to meet you guys. So, please consider coming and signing up for it. So, petersonacademy.com/Brook. And if you sign up and you come, then you also get, I think, a year free of Peterson Academy courses. So, I think that's a good good reason to do it. I think they're going to have, over time, they're going to have hundreds of courses, hundreds of classes, and by variety of different professors, and it's going to be a good place to gain knowledge about different topics from experts. So it should be fun. All right, let's jump in to Kisin. Oops, let me do this. There we go. There he is. I'm doing it about 2:50 in. He's kind of given an introduction. He was an atheist. He was enamored by the new atheists, Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris and the other guy. And now, so I skipped that. Now he's into why, in a sense, he's turned against them, why he's turned away from them. And this is, I think, where the interesting part starts. So we will begin. And as you know, I'll stop him every 3 seconds and comment on it.
Delusion in 2006, and Hitchens delivered God is Not Great the following year. The argument was no longer about encouraging religious people to calm down and leave the rest of us alone. It was increasingly that religion was inherently wrong and bad.
But isn't religion inherently wrong? That is, isn't that part of why the whole idea of atheism is that it's wrong? That is, this, one of the questions you have to ask yourself about all these people that are turning away from atheism is, have they discovered that Christianity or religion generally is right? Have they discovered that that is where truth lies? Not truth in terms of human interaction, but truth, metaphysical, epistemological truth, and moral truth. Is that where truth belongs? Is that where truth is? Is the method of religion the method of discovering truth? Is that why they're moving away from atheism, or is it something else? So yes, Hitchens and Dawkins and others started to say Christianity is wrong. And generally, things that are wrong are probably bad for you. I'll say that again, because it's quite surprising, right? Things that are wrong are probably bad for you. One of the reasons we want to seek the truth. Truth shall free you, truth shall liberate you, something like that, there's a saying, right? But wrongness is not unrelated to benefit. And if religion is wrong, it's probably not good for you.
It was around this point that I began to lose my faith in atheism. The God delusion.
Notice that he started to lose his faith in atheism. And indeed, if that's how you hold your atheism, as faith, then you could lose it any time. You could gain it any time. It's faith. I don't hold my atheism as faith. I hold my atheism as a reasoned conviction, as something that, based on reason, I have concluded. It's the other side that holds their views on faith. And indeed, if all atheists have to say is, I have faith in atheism, if that's all atheists have to say, then atheism is worthless. But if atheists have to say is something about the use of reason and its validity and its justification, and by using reason we can see that the case for God is false, then you're not an atheist by faith. But it is revealing. I mean, his use of words, he's reading this. This is written text. He has thought about every word that he is saying. And he is saying faith in reason. Not good. Not good.
Around this point that I began to lose my faith in atheism. The God Delusion was the last Dawkins book I read, and the appeal of that discussion waned quickly for several reasons. First, it was clear to me that to attempt to challenge Islamic extremists with facts and logic, as Dawkins, Hitchin, and Harris had done, was to fail on purpose.
Now notice, I don't think that's true, but notice that he's going to make a really good point, a really, really good political point that pretty much I've only heard objectivists make before this. I mean, he's going to make it as a side issue when this is a really, really important point. So I don't think he quite understands the gravity of it and the importance of it. But this is true, right? And this is the sense in which, and this relates to Islam and the threat of Islam.
Despite their efforts, most of the Western world today operates under de facto blasphemy laws, which are enforced not by religious activists lobbying for censorship, but by knife-wielding fanatics and suicide bombers.
Absolutely. That is, we stay silent. We don't say things about Islam, certainly in Europe, because we're afraid. And we're not afraid arbitrarily. We're not afraid out of faith. We're not afraid because, just emotional, because we're emotionalists, like so many people are afraid of, going to New York or something. But this is a rational fear. These people have said what they will do to those of us criticizing their religion. And in certain parts of Europe, they have acted on it. They have done it. So you know exactly what's coming. So this is a completely rational fear. And this is the point he makes, which is rare that anybody else makes, that's very good.
The liberalism that the new atheists so enthusiastically espouse, the idea that we should be free to criticize, mock, and satirize anything, including religion, only works when the government is willing to protect you from the consequences.
That is right. And that is the job of the government. That's the part that's missing that he hasn't said. It's the job of the government, and it's what it means for the government to protect a First Amendment right. What it means for the government to protect your First Amendment right is to protect you from the knife-wielding Muslim who is going to kill you because you criticize the religion. It means that the government is going to do what it can to destroy the capacity of the knife-wielding Muslim to do that. It is something that Leonard Peikoff wrote about in 1989 with regard to the fatwa against Salman Rushdie by Ayatollah Khomeini. And he said it's the job of the U.S. government in its responsibility to protect the freedom of speech of Americans to silence Khomeini, to prevent him from living by that fatwa, and to do whatever is necessary in order to do that. Whether that means replacing the regime in Iran, whether it means rounding up all the fanatics who abide by this version of Islam and therefore are eager to kill Salman Rushdie. And of course, this was not an idle threat. Salman Rushdie went into hiding for many years, and of course, recently, what was it, a year ago, maybe it's a year and a half ago, was attacked by a knife-wielding Muslim and had his eye taken out and lost use of one of his arms. And why? Because the United States government failed in its responsibility to protect his freedom of speech. So, great point. If we argue that we should be allowed to offend Islam and to criticize Islam, we need the government to protect us, to protect our ability and our right to do exactly that.
In seeking to liberate us from the tyrannical instincts of dogmatic Christians, the new atheists actually delivered us into the hands of a different and far more pernicious religious zealotry, from which the ordinary citizen has no security at all.
So I don't know if he's talking here about Islam, but we're not delivered into Islam, and certainly the new atheist didn't deliver us into Islam, and certainly it's not a criticism of the criticism of Christianity that led us into Islam. And the new atheists were very, very good at criticizing Islam. And they had the balls and the courage to do that. And one wonders, in spite of the government's pathetic nature and pathetic respect for freedom of speech, if more of us stood up and criticized Islam as a mass, as a large group, the Muslims would have to retreat. The only thing that gives them power is that individuals do it and everybody backs away from them. That's not the new atheist fault. I mean, they were courageous. They stood up and spoke. It's our fault that we didn't have their back, that we didn't support them, that we didn't come out in mass to support their attack on religion, and particularly their attack on Islam. And we didn't. And our governments didn't. And our intellectuals didn't. And our media didn't. And nobody did. So they were less. So we are all left at the whim of Islamic fanatics who are willing to kill us for what we say and for the criticism, our criticism of their religion. We don't yet, I emphasize, have the Christian fanatics who are going to come after us for criticizing their religion.
Second, the fact that many religious ideas are scientifically inaccurate and that
many religious ideas are scientifically inaccurate? That's the best you have? Many scientific ideas are scientifically inaccurate. Burning bushes, sun stopping, the day stopping so Joshua can finish his battle and win. Resurrection of Christ, scientifically inaccurate. Is that how you would present it? How about scientifically false? Scientifically BS, made up. I mean, it's this, I guess he took atheism on faith, so what are you going to do here? It's no. They're false. Scientifically false. And by the way, false, not just scientifically false, factually false. And arbitrary. Somebody told a story. We all believe that story. Why? Because somebody told a story. Because of faith. Not because of reason.
Many religious ideas are scientifically inaccurate, and that religion has been and continues to be used for evil is not in dispute. Indeed, one of the core claims of the new atheists is that religion produced evils that were far worse than the body count of non-believers. Sure, Stalin, Hitler, and Mao were bad, they argued, but they weren't motivated by their atheism or its holy book.
That's right. They weren't motivated by atheism. They were motivated by a new religion. And this is interesting because later on, I hope we get there, he will talk about woke and the new left being a new religion, right? And that we've given up on Christianity, we've adopted this new religion, call it woke. Then why won't he acknowledge here, which there's a sense in which I agree with him, why won't he acknowledge here that communism and fascism had all the trappings of religion, all of them? They had a leader who communes with the world of spirits. They had, the individual sacrificed to the good of the spirit, proletarian, Aryan race, whatever you want to call it. No, he's not going to say that those are religions. He's going to say they were done in the name of atheism. Atheism made them possible. And I say, no, religion made them possible. Religion made them possible.
This view of the Holocaust, Stalinism, and the Great Leap Forward as accidental byproducts of a non-complicit atheism is, to me, a complete misunderstanding of the impact a lack of religious faith has on the way we think about other human beings.
But it is religious faith, isn't it? It is religious faith. It's adopting all the ways in which religion, the way religion works. It's just taking a different God. It just replaces God. And it's not done in the name of atheism. And it's not that atheism necessitates, as he's going to say in a minute, a disrespect for human life. He's missing the point. And then he makes the right point later on, but he won't connect it to here, which tells me he's not thinking straight.
To me, a complete misunderstanding of the impact a lack of religious faith has on the way we think about other human beings. The central positive feature of the religious worldview is to ensure that human beings do not see themselves as the sole arbiters of truth and justice.
Exactly. But that is not the good of religion, right? He says this is the one good thing about religion, that individuals don't see themselves as the arbiters of what's true and what's just. Then who is the arbiter of what's true and what's just? Who's the arbiter of what's true and what's just? I mean, God, I guess. Reality, but reality doesn't, there's no justice in reality. There's no even truth in reality. Who is the arbiter of what true is just? It's the individual. It has to be the individual. Now, individuals might make mistakes. They might get it wrong, but there's nobody else. So even people who take it that it's God, all they're doing is subjectively, them personally, choosing what God, what truth, what justice, depending on what religion and how to interpret that religion in this particular context they have. You don't get out of that fact that only individuals can judge. Only individuals can decide what's true. You don't get around that by adopting religion. You just maybe make it more arbitrary, more second-handed, more collectivist by adopting religion, that's all. But it's still true that the individual makes that choice. And if God was like, yeah, you really shouldn't murder people. You really, shouldn't engage in slaughter. You shouldn't fight over religion. But that's not God. That's not in Judaism, and it's not in Christianity, and it's not in Islam. God is not that at all. Respect human life. There's no respect for human life in religion. I think I told you this. I read this statistic, which is stunning. During the 30-year war, Germans killed 1/3 of the German population in the name of Christianity. The Catholics killed the Protestants killed the Catholics. 1/3 of Germany's population was killed through the infighting within the German states between those who were Protestant and Catholic killing each other.
Impact a lack of religious faith has on the way we think about other human beings. The central positive feature of the religious worldview is to ensure that human beings do not see themselves as the sole arbiters of truth and justice.
Not a positive, a negative.
That having torn God down from his pedestal, we do not put ourselves in his place. Yes, of course, atheist mass murderers like Stalin and Hitler weren't motivated to kill millions because of religious differences. But their ability to rationalize their actions and to persuade other people to support them was a product of the sense in which, in the absence of God, we get to make up any rules we want.
No. It's in the absence of reason we get to choose whatever, we make up whatever reasons we want. It's the absence of reason that allows us to rationalize whatever we want to rationalize. It's exactly what religion did. It's exactly what the Catholics and Protestants did in rationalizing slaughtering each other. All Stalin and Hitler did was take the same kind of rationalizations that Christianity has had since it was adopted by the Roman Empire to justify slaughter, and use those rationalizations to justify slaughter in the name of a new God, the proletarian or the Aryan race. There's no difference here. Indeed, it's only once you abandon reason, once you embrace faith, once you embrace the complete and utter subjective nature of belief and faith, it's only when you do that can you rationalize this kind of behavior. And the only way to get rid of this kind of behavior, the only way to not rationalize mass slaughter, is to have respect for the human mind, for reason, and to demand reasons for everything that you do. To actually demand that if you're going to act in a particular way, there be a reason to do it. Not a rationalization, not a made up for the sake of others. And that requires that truth and justice be a determinant at the individual level. Only the individual can reason. Only the individual can think. There's no collective thinking. There's no collective reasoning. It's the religious mentality of a communist, of a fascist, of a Christian, of a Muslim, of a Jew. It's that collectivistic religious mentality. That is the mentality that can rationalize away anything. Anything. God wanted it. That's it. All I have to say is God wanted it. You have to break a few eggs to make an omelet, is Lenin's term. To benefit the Aryan race, so 6 million Jews have to die. Why is that a big deal? It's to the benefit of the Aryan race. It's the benefit of God. God commanded this. The Aryan race demands this. What's the difference? It's an authoritarian epistemology. It's the epistemology that says, oh, God. It's an epistemology that says you cannot discover truth and you cannot judge what is just, but have to accept truth and what is just from an authority who communes with the spirits of the Aryan people, the spirit of God, the spirit of somebody, but you are nothing. You just follow orders. That's where you get the murder and slaughter and Holocaust and destruction that World War II and communism brought us. Atheism is nothing. It's just the negation of faith. It's what do you replace Christianity with? You don't replace it with atheism. You have to replace Christianity with a reason-based idea, a reason-based philosophy, a rational set of ideas. It's what the Enlightenment started to do and what I think Ayn Rand completes. But that's the opposite of Christianity, the opposite of religion is not atheism. If religion is a set of ideas about epistemology and about morality, as Ayn Rand called it, a primitive philosophy, then the alternative, the opposite of it, has to be a philosophy. And if this philosophy over here is based on faith and collectivism and a Platonic, a philosopher king type epistemology, then the opposite of that is an epistemology of reason. Reason can only be an individual characteristic. Only individuals can reason. So therefore, a philosophy of individualism and reason. That's what combats religion, not atheism. And that's why communists and socialists are on the religious axis, because they embrace the philosopher king epistemology, and they embrace collectivism, they embrace altruism, they embrace all the key philosophical characteristics of religion, and they apply it to something a little different. So it's stunning to me to place religion over here and communism and fascism over here because they disagree about which God to worship. I mean, this is what's required to do real thinking, is to see what's common and what's different. And what you discover is there's far more common between Christianity, socialism, and fascism than there is different between them. Far more common. And yet the real alternative is an Enlightenment-based, reason-based, individualistic-based ideology. I don't know why that's so hard, but it seems to be unbelievably hard, but it seems to be that almost nobody out there gets it. And that is truly stunning and strange. All right, let's keep going.
This is precisely why we had to invent the concept of human rights in the immediate aftermath of World War II.
We don't invent human rights in the immediate aftermath of World War II. I mean, again, historically, this is completely perverse. you don't invent human rights after World War II. I mean, the concept of individual rights, which are basically human rights, the only legitimate human rights that exist, was not invented after World War II. It was invented during the Enlightenment. And it's the negation of that concept during World War II that led to the horrors. It was a concept that came about during the Enlightenment because of the horrors that religion brought us in the 30-year war and the 100-year war, and a realization that reason was our means of survival, and we needed an individualistic philosophy in order to thrive. And that was the Enlightenment project, a reason-based individualistic project. And from that reason-based individualistic philosophy, and out of that project came the concept of individual rights, not after World War II, in the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America in 1776.
Without a worldview in which we're all worthy of dignity and respect by virtue of being children of God, you have to reinvent that particular wheel through...
Don't have to reinvent it. That wheel was gone. By the time you have individual rights, you don't need the UN. You just need a proper philosophy of rights, which John Locke certainly gets us on the right road. And you're trying to subvert that and basically return us to a primitive Christianity, which is just so sad.
The United Nations. My point is, it is extremely easy to prove that religion is evil, but I'm not convinced that proving that it causes more evil than its absence is quite as easy. Third,
well, the absence, what comes in instead of it? Sure, you can think of stuff that come in that's worse than it.
The central question new atheists fail to answer, and one that we put to Richard Dawkins in this interview here, is whether, irrespective of how scientifically true religion may or may not be, it is nonetheless both useful and inevitable.
I don't think it's useful, and it might be inevitable. That is, I think, inevitable for 2,000 years ago, maybe even inevitable for 300 years ago, but it's not inevitable today. And I don't know why you can't see the difference. I don't know what Dawkins' answer is, but it's the fact that it was inevitable for man before the discovery of science and reason doesn't make it inevitable for man in a modern, civilized, rational, science-based society.
The Dawkins answer is as close to quoting Karl Marx's idea that religion is the opium of the masses as you can get without reproducing it verbatim.
The comfort that you get from believing a falsehood is like a drug, and it's a perfectly valid argument to say that there's everything to be said for the drug.
No. It is like a drug. I agree with that. But you can't be positive about that. Reality will always beat the drugs. I mean, unless you're in unbelievable pain, unless your life is rotten, unless you're about to collapse and die, and you need the drugs just to survive, okay. But in a normal life, to live on drugs is awful versus the alternative. But that's what religion offers you. It offers you a drug. And Dawkins is saying, not too bad.
This is a persuasive argument in the sense that truth matters irrespective of how uncomfortable or impractical it may be.
That's true.
But the problem here is that the absence of old religion seems to produce only a vacuum into which a new religion rushes in. And this new religion...
That is true. And that was true of socialism and communism and fascism, which you failed to mention earlier. And that was true and is true. But isn't the question then is why? And is there something you can do about it? Is there some better way we can arrange things so that we don't fall into a new religion every time we give up an old religion? And by what standard does one measure the new religion worse than the old religion if it's all based on faith? So the real question has to be, is there a proper alternative to religion? Is there a set of ideas that can produce a culture that is devoid of religion? That's the question. And I think the answer is yes. But it requires effort. And that's the kind of answer that they're not seeking. They're not even investigating. Because it leads them towards reason, And reason is the one thing that never makes it into these conversations. It's truly surprising.
Has just as little regard for the truth as the old ones. That's why Richard Dawkins, who spent his best years arguing with creationists, is now increasingly forced to explain basic biological concepts like the inability to change your sex by incantation on national television. The reason new atheism has...
So it's interesting that he's just pointing this out, something that I told you would happen. He's calling woke or modern leftism a religion, but he didn't call socialism and fascism a religion, which is interesting. Why not? He should have done exactly the same back then.
Has lost its...
Because it wasn't supporting the claim that he was trying to make.
Television. The reason new atheism has lost its mojo is that it has no answers to the lack of meaning and purpose that our post-Christian societies are suffering from.
That's right. And atheism isn't supposed to, because atheism is not a philosophy. Atheism is just the rejection of, mysticism. It's a rejection of faith. So what's the positive? Where's the positive? And that is, again, the question. Is there a positive that you can imagine? They can't. And this is where they fail so badly. And this is where the new atheists failed, because they offered a critique, but they never offered a positive argument, which wouldn't have been bad if somebody else had offered a positive argument. But nobody with cultural force leveraged what the new atheists were doing in order to offer that positive argument.
What will fill that void? Religious people have their answer. Do the rest of us?
That is actually a great way to end it. What will fill the void? Religious people do have an answer to it. They know what will fill the void. Do we know what will fill the void? Do we have an answer to that? And I think I do. And it's our job to get the word out there, that there is an alternative to fill the void. And that alternative is Enlightenment values and ultimately Objectivism, ultimately Ayn Rand. And that's what we're trying to do. And it's crucial. And notice that the answer is reason and rationality. That's, at the end of the day, the answer. Because their problem is primarily epistemological. Note how he said faith in atheism, and how he said, he was negative about the idea that the individual is the judge of what's true. All right, we have one question. I'll remind you that'd be great to get your support. We've got well over 100 people watching right now. A sticker from everybody with a few bucks, value for value, would be great. The show is supported through contributions from people like you. By the way, you can support the show on a monthly basis, which would be fantastic. Or you can increase your support if you already do the monthly basis, which would also be cool. I know most of you listen to the show. Vast majority of you listen to the show, not live. You can do that on Patreon, Yaron Brook Show, or you can do that on PayPal, Yaron Brook Show, or through my website, yaronbrookshow.com/membership. And you can support the show on a monthly basis. My goal is, by the end of the year, to grow that monthly revenue by a third. So 33% growth, that's huge. So hopefully you will help me get there by upping your monthly support, or by becoming a first-time supporter. You might be listening and haven't contributed, haven't had time, but $2, $5, all the way to $1,000 a month, all of that helps. Please consider doing that. And supporting it on Patreon or on yaronbrookshow.com/membership. All right, Jennifer asks, some people don't even necessarily have a problem with what you claim to know, but with the fact that you claim to know it. Yeah, I think that's right. I think it's the problem is, and the challenge is epistemological. Who the hell are you? Who the hell are you? To make the claim, to stand by the claim, to argue the claim. right? And you as an individual can't know truth. I'm dying to ask Kisin how he knows what he knows. Because somebody told him? Because it's just faith? He doesn't believe in truth? He's given up on truth completely? How does he know what he knows? That's the question. He needs to answer. Thank you, Jennifer. Paul, thank you for the sticker. Paul, listen to my challenge and made a sticker, $10. $10, everybody did $10 right now, we would be through the roof in terms of our goals. So please consider a sticker of any amount that will get us closer to our goal. All right, Martin has a $20 question. Thank you, Martin. Self-destructive is a widely used term in common culture, whereas it seems there's an absence of oppositional term like self-constructive. Do you think it has to do with the altruistic morality? Yeah, I think it does. I think the idea of doing things that build up yourself, the idea of doing things that are good for you. We have self-help. That's as close as we come to the concept of self-constructive, or the concept of self is the self-help yeah. So in other words, it is altruism. I lost train of thought there. It is altruism, and it is absolutely a consequence of the fact that we don't have a lot of language other than self-help to really describe self-interested actions, self-interested activities, the work towards self-interest. We just don't have that in our vocabulary, because thinking has not gone into it. Again, except with the exception of the self-help. And the self-help, unfortunately, because it's trying not to upset the altruism, is too shallow. It's too simplistic. It doesn't go to the heart, doesn't go to the core. It doesn't really build you up in the way that you should be built up. And I think that's true in psychology as well. There's no complete embrace of make yourself the best human being you can be, partially because the challenge with regard to free will, and partially because, again, I think everything we do is hindered by whether explicitly or not, this idea that, well, that opposed altruism, we can't do that. All right. All right, let's see. Thank you, Martin. Really appreciate that. Okay, people are stepping up. That's good. That's good. We got a sticker from Barry for $20. Thank you, Barry. Really, really appreciate that. And here's more from Barry. This is his 10th super chat. So we got the 9th and the 10th. One for $20, one for $50. Thank you, Barry. Really appreciate the support. Thank you. That's how we get to goals. We get people coming in with $50 stickers, and we blow through the numbers. Fenn Harper says, this is for last night's interview. I gained some new perspective. Cheers. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And as I said, I want to bring in more people onto the show who are not objectivists necessarily, but have good ideas, interesting ideas, important ideas, to share those ideas with us. I intend to do more of that. I've got a list of different thinkers in different fields that can contribute to, I think, our understanding of the world, and can do interesting Q&As. So I'll be inviting more of those people. But generally, if you have people you would like me to invite, that would be great. I mean, I'm open to it. I don't want to have debates, so I don't want to invite somebody I disagree with and we're going to debate this issue. But people who I don't disagree with on a particular on the issue that we're going to be doing the interview, those are the ideas. Robert Zubin, I will bring him on. I've got Robert Bryce first, I think we've got a date for him already. who is also going to be talking about nuclear. So I might wait a little bit to have Robert on after that. But first we'll have Bryce on. All right, let's see. Andrew, what do you think is his fear of an individual acknowledging himself as an independent judge of reality? Does individual judgment infer power over others to him? No, I think what it does is it infers total subjectivism. I think that this is the intrinsic subjective problem. Truth is the intrinsic, in God, outside of us. And therefore, we must just do as we are told because truth and justice are out there. Or if they're in me, I can do whatever the hell I want. Whatever I want is true. There is no objective standard. They view objective as intrinsic. We're saying, oh, no. Truth is you discover about what's in reality. But you have to discover it. And you have to judge it as true based on reason. That's the other thing, the differences. They view knowledge as automatic in one way or the other. Either knowledge imprints itself on your consciousness, that's the intrinsicist view, or you just feel it, you just commune with it, you just get it. It's inside your consciousness. But either way, knowledge is not something you look at, discover, figure out, makes mistakes about, but then figure out what's right, like the scientific process. They reject that. I mean, pretty much everybody rejects it. And what's embraced is, well, it's either out there or it's in here. And what we say is it's in the interaction between this and the world out there. It's in your mind discovering that. Right? That's what truth is. All right, let's see. Andrew. Oh, so his fear is subjectivism. So, this is what everybody says. You got a binary choice. You've only got two, right? It's a two-party system, right? You only got two choices, intrinsicism or subjectivism. And a lot of people say, I want intrinsicism, because it seems to them right now, today, that intrinsicism is thus dangerous. Read ominous parallels, because that's where it leads, right? Intrinsicism is subjectivism ultimately, and it's an unmitigated disaster. It's an unmitigated disaster that leads to horror, just like complete subjectivism does. But complete subjectivism is unsustainable. So this is back to kind of dim, right? Disintegration is not sustainable. You got to go with some form of integration. And the only form of integration that's likely in the world in which we live is a misintegration, and therefore they live. So we're stuck between two horrible alternatives. Two horrible alternatives. And, some people just don't get it. They don't understand it. They don't understand the alternatives. They don't see the alternatives. They don't think about these issues philosophically. They just, Christians seem nicer, so let's go with the Christians. The left is nasty, certainly. Look at them right now. They're certainly nasty, there's no question. So we can't do the left. Let's just go with what feels cuddly and nice, and that is the right. And that's how the world will go, and we will all suffer the consequences of it. And it's not like the alternative is better. It's not like going with the left is going to save us. It really is ultimately just a question of what buys you the most time to try to convince people of an alternative. And it's very hard to convince them of an alternative. And we're going to have to buy a lot of time. A lot of time. It's not going to happen quickly. But in my view, there's no question that, the very few people think about this properly and really think about it and understand what's going on in the world. Very few people. Richard says, why does Israel-Palestinian conflict get far more attention than other global territorial disputes? Well, because two reasons. Israel is part of the West, and therefore people in the West are interested in it. But more than that, there's a certain expectation about what the West will do and how it will behave. The West is expected to be appropriately sacrificial. It's expected to be appropriately altruistic. It's supposed to be civilized. It's supposed to fight wars based on rules of engagement that the civilized world has determined. When barbarians fight each other, we expect them to be barbarians, but now we have a civilized side and we expect them to be civilized, so we want to track them, watch them, notice them, and see what they're doing. So that's reason number one. Reason number two is it's a bunch of Jews. People are always interested in what Jews do. Jews are their favorite people to hate, and Israel is a country of Jews, and they are appropriately hated. They're appropriately followed, discussed, debated, and resented. And so that is exactly what is going on. That's exactly why Israel is in the news. They are part of the West, and we expect certain modes of behavior from them, and they're Jews. All right. Apollo Zeus, do you have any houseplants? Yeah, I've always had houseplants. Wherever I've lived, I've had houseplants. Houseplants, flowers. I think surrounding yourself with things that are alive but can't destroy your furniture and pee on your carpet and, require walking outside is an incredible value. So I don't want a pet, but, dealing with houseplants, it just livens up a place. It makes it prettier. It makes it warmer. It's about having life around you. So yes, I have houseplants, and my wife loves, I do too, but my wife especially loves orchids, and we have a bunch of orchids all over the place. All right. Thank you, guys. That was the last question. So I appreciate the support, all the super chatters. Really, really appreciate it. Please consider supporting the show on a monthly basis. Please consider supporting on Patreon or on PayPal, yaronbrookshow.com/membership. Don't forget, if you're interested in a public speaking seminar with me, a workshop with me, small group, then you can do that. By signing up for the seminar. It's going to be on June 19th, right after OCON in Southern California. If you'd like this podcast, if you like a free podcast, free of ads, you can sign up on my website for that as well. And I'm offering personal coaching to the extent that people like that. All right, I see we have, a lot of the people who disagree with me on the chat are plants. Thanks for pointing that out, William. All right, everybody, I will see you tomorrow, same time, 2 o'clock, 2 p.m., same format, and see you there. And we hit exactly on the minute, 3 hours. Thanks, everybody. Bye.